Hey everybody, welcome to the Double Stuff Podcast. We are double the hosts, double the topics, and double the fun. I'm Sarah.
I'm Dan.
I'm Charity.
I'm Alan.
And this season we're talking about educational related things. So we're going to go down the reading, writing, arithmetic, all that kind of stuff. So today we're talking about reading.
Yay!
Do you guys read?
No. I mean, yes.
Butterfly in the sky.
A reading rainbow throwback.
So it's mainly going to be books that we remember reading when we were in school. It could be from elementary, high school, even college. Do you guys have maybe your first memory of maybe one of the first books you guys read?
Not the first book. When you were talking about that, I remember in high school reading Fuzzy Buttons, which was a postmodern book, and that was my first time reading any sort of postmodern literature, and I was like, this is terrible.
I was like, how old were you?
This is terrible. Oh, I was in high school.
Okay, high school.
Yeah.
Okay.
First book that I remember reading, yes, it's one of my favorites. We've talked about it before, mainly because the illustrations were just so beautiful. It was St. George the Dragon Slayer, which is retold by Margaret Hodges and illustrated by Trina Shart Hyman.
Shart?
I know.
It's an unfortunate name.
Too.
Yeah, that's true.
A Shart Hyman. Yikes. I've kept that book to this day. I think it's still at my parents' house.
Yeah.
Nice. What about you, Dan? What was one of the first books you read in school, high school, college, elementary?
You're talking about like books that were assigned, right? Not just like books that we read.
It could be either one.
It could be either one, but I guess, when we were younger, it was mainly assigned books. Okay. So were there any that was... you kind of had to read, but you found yourself you liked it or hated it?
Yeah, I mean, they were in high school, so I can't remember like necessarily earlier than that. But in high school, we had to read The Giver for an English class, and I loved that book.
I cried in that book.
But I'd never heard of it before, and I'd been a big reader at the time, but it was just one of those that's like, oh yeah, I got to read this, and I was just like, no, I get to read this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's always nice when it changes your perspective. It starts out as something you have to read because you have to get a grade, but it's like, it wasn't as bad as what I thought.
Yeah,
absolutely. What about you, Chair?
So I was thinking about my first first chapter book, I guess, that I thought was great. So at the school that we grew up in, I don't know if Sarah had this experience because she was older. She started off older than I was, but after lunch, we would either have the teacher or like a volunteer parent would come in and read to us after lunch.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I know the younger kids did that. So it sort of like settled everyone down, it sort of put us to sleep because you got that food coma, and then you have a soothing voice reading a bedtime story, and then you have to get up and do math. But
because Miss Thompson read Caddy Woodlawn, that was one of the books we read.
Okay, she didn't read that one to us, but anyway, the first book that we had, one of the moms came in and read Chocolate Fever by Robert
Chocolate
Kimmel
Fever is a
Smith.
great book.
That will always, I even have a copy of it now, and I'm obviously not in elementary school, but that book, I just absolutely loved it, and I bought myself a copy a couple years ago. I found it at a used bookstore, and after she read us that story, I found the book in the library, and I just read it over and over again. Like, for some reason, that book was just the greatest thing to me. I think that was, I want to say second grade.
Nice.
So maybe I was 7 years old or something, but that was I think that was my first bigger chapter book, and then I just read a ton after that too. So
yeah, one of the bigger chapter books that I believe was required reading, kind of along the lines of The Giver, was Hatchet, and I loved Hatchet. That was a great survival tale.
Yeah, I think, and I should have looked up, the author and stuff, but I think the very first chapter book I read, and I don't know if you guys, in elementary school, did you guys have Dear Time? Which stood for
Drop Everything and Read.
It was called Dear Time. So
that was every time. That was my recess time. That was middle science.
There would be a time we would be working on homework or something for school, and then all of a sudden the teacher would be like, Dear Time. And basically you just close all the books and you could sit under your desk and read for about 10, 15 minutes.
Teacher probably had a hangover, was like, everyone needs to shut up.
Shut up and leave. So
Mrs. Thompson. Sorry, Mrs. Thompson.
She's still at that school. Sorry. So I was looking at my old school a couple days ago. Just
she
out
looks
of curiosity.
exactly the same.
She's still there. I was like, oh, but it made me think. I was like, when you're little, you think that everyone
is so
over
old.
the age of 10 years old is ancient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when I was in fourth grade, I thought Miss Thompson was just at death's door. And I looked her up and I was like, oh, she wasn't old at my when I think she was probably in her 30s.
Yeah, because like she's like 50 now, so I'm like, crap, she was 30. You know?
Yeah. Well, my 5th grade teacher is in her 50s now, so she's a few years younger than my mom. But at the time she was teaching me, she was only 28. I thought she was like 75. Like when you're a kid, you have no concept of age. Yeah, you don't think of that stuff.
Yeah.
28's so young now.
I remember 28.
Again, none of us are that far away. We all sound like, man, I remember 28 back in my day.
So far away.
Yeah. Well, here another side note. It is kind of weird because now that I'm a professor at a college, and I'm not that far in age from the students, but enough to be like, oh, look at these young little tykes. They don't know what life has in store for them. I'm going to teach them something, you know? And it's kind of weird like that. It's almost a disconnect, but it's almost a bit of a connection with them. And, you know, it's different than
it's because you're in a place of authority now, which gives you that older feel, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. And I utilize that as much as my ability. No, but anyway, going back to what we were talking about. So I think the first chapter book that I remember reading, and again, I don't remember the author, but the title of the book was called Blades of Grass. And it was
sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
It was one of those like girl growing up in the wilderness of some place, because the cover had like a lot of grass and mountains and stuff like that.
I think I read the sequel to that, Where the Red Fern Grows.
Oh yeah.
Oh, another sad book. But it was a big deal for me because
They're all sad.
That book was 300 pages. At that time, I think I was 8 years old, 7, 8. I had never read a book. I felt like I had read the Bible.
Right.
Because I was like 300 pages.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a pretty big deal for me for reading a chapter book like that. So I think that was the first chapter book I read.
Well, from 4th through 6th grade at the school that we went to, at the end of the year, after you do all of your regular reading assignments and stuff, I think like the last couple months of school, you started a novel, like a big book.
The Medallion.
Yeah, we had the Medallion. We had some like
the Bronze Bow.
And then what was the Nazi book?
See, I didn't read that.
Oh, I read that one.
The story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer?
I don't think we would have read that for elementary.
It was some World War II book, but like the kids all read the same book each year. So like I think from like 90 something, maybe to like 2000.
At least probably 10 to 12, 15
every
years.
like 6th graders always had the World War II book, and then the Bronze Bow was the 5th grade book, and then the Medallion was the 4th grade book. So every class read that same book.
The Medallion was great because I had never read an adventure book before, and it's that historic fiction because
it's about a knight.
Or it's like a little boy that wanted to be, and in order to, he had to do all these things in order to reach the medallion, in order to gain this, you know. And like I said, I had never read that kind of book before, but it was so much fun. I still remember what it was about and the title and all that.
I don't recognize any of these books. It's crazy.
Do you read, Dan?
Yeah, I read all the time. I like reading. I just don't recognize any of those.
Well, going back to what we were talking about, like super sad, like elementary or middle school books, Bridge to Terabithia.
Oh yeah,
fantastic book.
Never read that one. I know they made a movie.
They did.
Yeah.
So while we are talking about books and stuff for school, because we also, and this depending on the school you guys went to, we also read a lot of poetry. Like we had to read a bunch of poetry, and
say it like it was a challenge.
Well,
you read a 300-page book.
Yeah, but
you can do it.
But I mean, I could read a poem fine, but it would be like, so what was the author trying to say?
Yeah.
And that stuff always, I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like, why don't you ask them?
Yeah, it's like twinkle twinkle little star, how I wonder what you are. What existential crisis was the author dealing with when he said twinkle twinkle little star? I'm like, I don't know.
Well, and as someone who's written stuff before, sometimes you just put something in there because it sounds good, or because it rhymed, or just because you felt that you should write it. Sometimes there's not a reason behind everything.
Yeah, but you know, the teacher always wants like, oh, he was struggling, and his wife died, his 15 children died, he couldn't have any money for bread, he died in poverty, and this is the last thing he wrote. You know, and while that could be the case for some. Well, not for everything.
But most of the poetry that my kids are exposed to, and we're all exposed to all the time, is manipulated through music. I mean, we listen to music all the time, and so we have an insight as to what the author is kind of going through because it's backed with, some sort of score that gives us the intention of what the author of the poem was trying to emote.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, emote. Yeah. What about you, Dan?
I don't, I've never been able to really get poetry. And it's the same reason why I'm not as big into like music. It's the same type of thing. But like my wife loves poetry. So like I know that there are people out there who just, it really connects with them on a really like deep level. I'm just like, I don't know what you're trying to say. I'm so confused. Just tell me. Just tell me in plain words.
Yeah.
And then the mind-blowing thing when I learned as a kid that not all poems have to rhyme. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Because like you expect everything to rhyme.
It's supposed to be a couplet.
Yeah.
That's what it's supposed to be.
Well, and if you go to a Christian school, you might have a teacher that's like, where's the Christ? I had a teacher, where's the Christ figure in each story? So if you're reading like Narnia, like that series, you can pick out pretty easily who represents Jesus in that story. But I read The Great Gatsby, His Eyes Were Watching God. We did White Fang. Like we read a whole bunch of stuff, and I was like, Jesus doesn't have to be in every book. Like it's okay. Like,
and I don't think he wants to be. He's like, don't put me in that.
Some metaphors were very forced. Like I think there was near the end of The Great Gatsby, there was a line that says like he carried something on his back, like it was a bag or something, and he was like, see, that represents Jesus and carrying the cross, going to the crucifixion. I'm like, no, it's not. Like nobody was talking about the crucifixion. Yeah, I'm like, what are you reading? I don't think Fitzgerald was talking about crucifixion here. This was the Roaring
If anything, he was trying to see how can I do the Charleston and write a book at the same time.
It's just so some people I think just take it a bit too far.
Where's all the grapes and grapes of wrath?
With poetry, I've always wanted to get into certain types of poems, like epic poems, or things like Dante's Divine Comedy, or Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I look at it and I think I'm like overwhelmed. I can't follow it. It's really just difficult to really like keep in mind what happened before and then like where it's going and stuff. So I want to be able to read more poetry.
Our high school teacher made us memorize a ton of poetry. I remember one poem.
Did
I
she
still remember. I am really good at memorizing stuff. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in a desert. Near them on the sand half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip sneer, cold command, tell that its sculpture's passions well read. I don't remember who wrote it. Now I remember that was sophomore year of high school, but like there's more to the poem, but I memorized that. And my teacher also, we had two different speeches from Hamlet that we got to pick from. There was the speak the speech I pray thee, like we did that, or you can do the to be or not to be. And that was a big old chunk. Like and memorizing speeches and poetry is kind of difficult. Doing Shakespeare, like that gave me a big respect for actors who are performing that, and not only memorizing it, but you have to remember it and you have to give all the emotions that are required to that. But
and you can't ad lib.
You can't ad lib in Shakespeare. Well, that brings up. Did you guys? We did that too. Did you guys read a lot of Shakespeare in high school?
A little bit,
or not just Shakespeare. But we also, my favorite was, it wasn't Shakespeare, but it was Cyrano de Bergerac. I actually enjoyed reading that.
Yeah.
So
I love the classics. Yeah.
And then The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. That was when I was like, oh man, classic literature is amazing.
We didn't read that one. I did The Picture of Dorian Gray, which I absolutely
you
loved.
mentioned that before.
Yeah, I love that one. Silas Marner. We did that one, which was a really cool story. We like all the Shakespeare ones. We did Sense and Sensibility. If you're a Jane Austen fan, we did Pride and Prejudice. All that. I read those now. Like I still love those books.
Yeah.
I want to say I want to say the class was called Forensics. It was like you had to like perform. And I had done I memorized and then did The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe.
Ooh,
Sure, nice.
I love
Quoth.
That's a fun one to do at Halloween. We did our high school did like a Harvest Fest party, I guess is what you want to call it if you're not into Halloween. But our teacher had us in this. Our teacher had us in it's gonna sound sketch. We were in this like dark room with a candle, but he would read Edgar Allan Poe stories
totally
to us.
Christian, so it's okay, guys. Find the Christ figure.
The Raven signifies.
No, but he read Edgar Allan Poe stories to us, and that was really cool. Like it got into the feel of the whole scary part of Halloween.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, see, but I enjoy that kind of stuff. Edgar Allan Poe and we did talking about like forensics, like performing and stuff. This is really corny, but I want to say it was either 4th or 5th grade for me. I think it was written by. I want to say it was written by Hans Christian Andersen, but it was called Hans Clodhopper. And
why does that sound familiar?
You probably read it too.
I probably did.
Since me and Charity went to the same school, we
have some of the same experiences.
Hand me down homework assignments. But yeah, I don't remember all of Hans Clodhopper, but it was like this guy with all these brothers, and they're like, I'm going to do this to win the fair princess. And so little Hans Clodhopper's like, I can. And all he had was these little rocks. Like, oh, you stupid idiot brother, you're not going to do this. But he would do all this stuff and help all these other people, and they would give him trinkets, and one was diamonds. And so he had diamonds, some rocks, a dead bird, and something else.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, but the funny thing is that our class, we enjoyed it so much, the teacher said we could perform it. So we actually did a performance.
Did someone bring in a dead bird?
No, we brought in our stuffed parrot. Remember Daddy had that stuffed parrot? That was one of the props.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, we are brushing back the cobwebs here.
So one
old
of
stories.
And remember those fake diamonds that Daddy had from the job?
Did we supply all the props for this? No other parents had props.
Apparently we had diamonds and a parrot we used as a dead bird. Anyway, we as 4th grade or 5th grade performed it. We brought the elementary kids into our classroom. They sat them down, and we performed the whole play about 5 or 6 times that day for all the different classes. And that was so much fun. I didn't perform in that, but I was kind of helping with the props and so I was kind of, I guess, maybe my
backstage manager, director type,
something like that.
It was meant to be.
I do love those, like harkening back to like old epics, old classics, and you were talking about the diamonds and I just have a couple of stones, and I was reading about how when Darius the Great from Persia would like roll in and just like in his conquest, like to show your submission, you would like bring a gift of earth and water, and that means that you have everything. That was like the tribute.
Oh, nice.
And then, well, it was until until the Scythians, instead of bringing earth and water, delivered a sparrow, a mouse, and a frog. And Darius was like, okay, does this mean that they submit? And they're like, actually, the sparrow means if you can't fly up into a tree, the mouse is if you can't burrow into the ground, and the frog is if you can't leap into water, you're going to be caught by our arrows or something like that.
It was just a warning.
Yeah, it was a warning. It wasn't a tribute at all. But I love those little
subtle.
Yeah.
Oh, and then Hans Clodhopper gets the princess at the end. Spoiler alert, because
I'm
then I know it's not a Hans Christian Andersen.
Yeah, no, it probably wasn't.
It has a happy ending.
It probably because it had the word Hans in it. That's probably why. But Clodhopper, you can't miss that.
Have you guys ever binge read a series? I know we talk about like binge watching a Netflix series, but is there like a series of books that you were just like devoured?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have a couple of them. I'm trying to think of the Hunger Games.
Oh yeah.
I read all the Hunger Games. I mean, I was just getting back into reading at that point. I hadn't read for a while, and I blew through those books. Yeah. I mean, they're not hard reads by any means, but yeah.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. I binge. I mean, I do like reading a lot. Again, I've enjoyed reading a lot of books, but I do read a lot of articles, so I know it's not necessarily the same thing. But in terms of books, like I said, I mentioned it in the last season talking about the comedy writing book. I brought that up in a couple other episodes. So, I mean, it's still learning, and technically that book is a text book.
So you binge read, like, topics, I guess. If
Maybe
you're
that's
binge
what
reading
it is.
Writing, I guess, is probably a...
So it is another odd thing. Like, when I didn't realize was that one of the books I do enjoy technically is a textbook that is assigned to students. So were there any textbooks that you had in school that you enjoyed?
Actually, yes, but it was in college.
Okay.
So I was taking a comic class. It was called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud.
That actually sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, but because it was done as a comic book. The whole textbook was done that way.
See, that makes it unique versus
really
just
cool.
a bunch of boring letters and text and stuff.
Turn to panel 7.
See, like for textbooks, aside from the comedy writing book, I enjoyed, because I also took a script writing class. I think it was called the Scriptwriter's Bible, and it's just teaching you
that's right.
all the different ways of how to properly format and when to use because I really wanted to learn the correct way of how to write a script for TV, film, radio, whatever. So yeah, so again, showing, because I do like the nonfiction and the informational stuff, to Charity's chagrin, as she always says. But I oddly like the textbook style of certain things.
So when did you discover a love of reading? Like, what made you be like, oh, this is great, and not just, oh, reading's boring,
It probably was when I read The Blades of Grass and when I read The Medallion.
So it was a specific book. It wasn't like a teacher that helped you through your reading class or something.
Nah,
nothing inspirational.
Did you have a hated book that you read?
Oh, a hated book.
I'm in the middle of one right now.
Are you?
You're actually reading a book that you hate right now?
Well, sometimes you just got to finish it.
I don't want to speak disparagingly of it, because it is, to a lot of people, a holy text. But I'm going through the Book of Mormon right now, and it is so boring.
Like tedious? Just tedious?
So boring. I'm waiting. I'm like, okay.
Is it like a story or a list of rules?
It's a story of the family of Lehi, who left Jerusalem, came to the Americas, and how this one family populated the Americas. And again, I'm trying to do this carefully, but the back and forth between the Lamanites and the Nephilites, and their story back and forth, and it's complicated and it's redundant. It's so redundant. It's chapters and chapters of redundancy, and I'm waiting for
the payoff.
Well, yeah, what's the inspiration? Now I will say, makes total sense how the LDS Church is huge on missionaries and going out into the world, because that's all the Book of Mormon is so far. But
maybe it's because it's like a history book. You're like reading.
It's exactly what it is. The only problem is it doesn't line up, and I don't want to speak disparagingly until I've gone all the way through, but it's
so
a
far
tough read.
It's challenging.
It's a tough read, and I've done the Bible 3 times, and I can't wait to go back to the Bible, because it just has so much more action and color.
Yes. As a pastor's kid, I do agree. I have to say that, because it's one of those on-the-job things, right? So, but anyway, this is a topic that, my gosh, as you can see, we could go through this for a really long time.
Well, we've talked about reading in books before. We'll definitely come back again.
Oh, goodness. It's one of those topics that maybe once every other season we'll be like, hey, let's bring up books again.
Let's talk about that good old book again.
So, but thank you guys for listening to another book-related topic and just our topics in general. If you want to listen to all of our newer episodes, just go to all of our different podcast platforms, and all of our archive episodes is on our website at doublestuffpod.com. Check us out on our social media platforms on Facebook and Instagram at Double Stuff Podcast, and on Twitter at Double Stuff P, and that's the letter P.
Butterfly in the sky.
I'm twice as high. Take a look. It's in a book. Reading Rainbow.